it would have been nice if you could just snap a few photos of an object that you needed to model and just turn it into a 3D model right on your phone. Well, turns out there is such method, and it's named Photogrammetry. And today I'll show you exactly how to do it with just your phone and a few free apps. But let's start with a bit of theory. For the uninitiated, photogrammetry is a science and a technology of getting information about physical objects through images or video and converting that into usable 3D models for a variety of use cases. Some good examples are Megascans, a big asset library where the majority of assets were made with photogrammetry, and Google Maps 3D view. It does seem like they may have done some modeling by hand, but yeah, usually it's satellites, planes, and cars collecting the data. In simple terms, photogrammetry is just a process of creating 3D models from photos. There are different methods of doing photogrammetry, but the main ones are the classic photogrammetry or close range in our case, as we're not using satellites or drones to do this. NeRF or neural radiance fields, which takes those same images but adds machine learning for the smoother surfaces, and it can work with semi-transparent objects better than photogrammetry. And you can also take fewer photos than with classic photogrammetry, which is always a plus since classic photogrammetry requires a ton of them. And the last method that I want to mention is LiDAR, which uses depth sensors. You can find them in some self-driving cars, professional 3D scanners, or pro-grade iPhones. Yes, it's that black dot near the camera array. The upside of this method is that it's pretty fast because you don't need to do as much compute on the data because it's already in 3D right from the scanner. But the problem with LiDAR is, well, it's a depth sensor. It only captures depth and not color, and so it gives you the geometry but with no textures. So you usually combine it with classic photogrammetry to get the textures too. All those methods differ in their speed and quality of the models, but the process is similar. You go around the object you want to capture and either take a ton, and I mean a ton of pictures from different angles, or take a video recording. Feed that into the software and it'll stitch all that together using some complex math to make the mesh. But enough theory, let's talk practice. And let's start with what you'll need. The list is pretty short with just your phone, iPhone or Android, doesn't really matter. If you have a iPhone Pro or Pro Max, its LiDAR sensor can speed up the process. Just keep in mind it may produce less detail than full photogrammetry or NeRF, and as I don't have a Pro iPhone, I will not be covering this in this video. But regardless of the phone you'll end up choosing, you'll also need an app to handle all the underlying processes. Something like Reality Scan for classic photogrammetry, but it's by Epic Games, so I will not be using it. If you wanna know why, I have a video about it. And for NeRF, you can use Luma 3D or any other app that you can find. Also, I recommend having a Wi-Fi connection because you'll be sending hundreds, if not hundreds of images. So if you have a limited internet plan, you'll burn through that quickly and your phone can heat up a bit in the process, so be aware. When all is ready, you can choose an object. Something like a teacup or a shoe will work just fine as a test subject. For what not to choose, I would not recommend shiny or transparent objects, anything with lots of small details, or something moving. So scanning pets, for example, isn't such a good idea. But let me stop here for a second and talk about an important topic in photogrammetry, which are feature points, which are points on an object that can be identified by the software, contrasting details or an uneven texture like on a rock. Something bland like this water bottle wouldn't be ideal because the software just doesn't have enough data to grasp, simply doesn't have enough details to scan. So something that has a lot of details that can be seen from multiple angles, and ideally all of the surface, not just a sticker on that same water bottle, for example. In this case, the rest of the surface is still featureless and this will be a problem. So something like a shoe or a log would be perfect because they have a really unique texture and don't have just a blank smooth surface. But what if you don't have an object with enough feature points? Well, there are actually techniques to make the surface of an object have more feature points and make it more usable for photogrammetry. Some recommend applying hairsprays to the object because you can just wash them afterwards, or fine talc powder, or you can just spray and paint it, but what you'll choose will depend on what object you have and if you need to preserve the original surface. So just take that into account. And while this is a technical downside of photogrammetry, something like lighter doesn't have this problem, so it can scan transparent or blend looking objects just fine, so that's just something to note. And I need to give props to Epic Games for having this nice little cheat sheet for picking objects that are good for photogrammetry. And all of those objects are actually a perfect representation of what to choose. They're not reflective, not transparent, and they all have a lot of feature points. But anyway, back to the rest of the video. For lighting over the environment, you'll need to get as even as possible. So an overcast sky for the outdoors or a big window with the same overcast sky for the indoors will work just fine. But if that's not an option, just try to avoid direct sunlight or any harsh lights, and you'll be good. As for the shooting technique, it will vary from app to app, but the generic advice is this. Aim for at least 40 to 70 good photos, keeping your phone steady, capturing every angle of the object, going around it in a kind of circular fashion. Once you are finished, the app will send all the images to the servers for the processing. This will take a few minutes, and if in the process any photos are flagged as bad, if they are blurry or poorly lit, you can just redo them. But having a few bad shots is fine, just as long as you have enough of the good ones. And if there are any specific instructions, like Luma 3D will give you a strict guide, whereas Reality Scan will just throw you into a sort of free roam. And again, your results may vary from app to app, from one object to another, so just give it a go, and once you'll get the hang of it, you can adjust what's needed. And that's pretty much it. You can export the models in OBJ, GFL, or USDZ, and use them wherever. By the way, here's a pro tip. The models from photogrammetry usually have very dense and weird-looking topology, in addition to having upwards of 8K texture with UVs, well, looking like this. But there's a simple fix for all that. You can just model the model by hand, roughly, then apply the shrink wrap modifier to get them even closer to the original, and then just bake the textures from the high density model that you got from photogrammetry into the optimized one. And it works especially well when you have some simple object where the textures matter more, like an ancient vase or an old coin. So yeah, that's photogrammetry for you. I wouldn't say that I use this every day or it's a must know, but it's quite useful when you need it. So it's definitely a nice tool to have at your disposal. And just as a finishing note, I mentioned using PCs and satellites. Well, you can actually use any camera, not just in your phone, but in a digital camera or a drone or, yes, a satellite. And process the images you'll get from that not on some server, but locally on your PC for more control and privacy. I'll leave some useful links in the video description for those who are interested, but for most folks, it's just too overkill. But anyway, if you find this useful, drop a comment, like, subscribe. But for now, bye-bye.